Hello. Hello. Welcome to Divergent Paths with Dan Dunford. I'm Dan Dunford. I am very sick, Dan Dunford, and so definitely having a good time. Hopefully, my voice will hold up. I am super happy and privileged to be joined by three incredible women today um, from the organization Brass Out Loud, um, which is they started in the middle of COVID and have been putting together a lot of really important and interesting work over the last 18 months, almost two, coming up 2 years, soon. So I'd just like to say I'm very pleased to be joined by Melissa Munoz, Rebecca Caru, and Kate Amrine. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Um, this is a nice little like like three different layers. I've known Kate for 9 years. I've known Melissa for 3 months, and just meeting Rebecca today. So we've got a nice little gradient of everything, and uh, I've started paying attention to some of the stuff that they were doing when they first launched it, their initial workshop last year, and as they've really been doing a lot of cool stuff, I just wanted to talk to them about it. So, um, how are you guys doing today?
I'm living the dream.
Is that I don't know. When I worked at Equinox, that was this thing that people always said to each other, and it was always like really sarcastic. I don't know. Um,
Ew.
but yes, I'm so happy to have you guys here. So let's just jump right into it. We're gonna just do some short background on each three of you and how you guys came together to start this nonprofit and really let's just hit the ground running. Melissa, let's just start with you.
All right. Thanks so much for having us here today, Dan. It is pretty funny how you know us all in three vastly different respects. And Dan so kindly gave me a ride to a marching band gig with Patriot Brass. So good times.
Oh yeah.
I I'm also sick, Melissa, today, but we're all powering through this together, and luckily we're all in different spaces.
Playing her. Oh well, actually, hold on 1 second. I forgot to hit the. Um,
Recording in progress.
there we go. We don't have to redo the beginning, but we can
Okay.
just keep going.
Okay, awesome. Well, my name is Melissa Munoz, and I am a trumpet player and educator, as well as a nonprofit administrator here in New York City. I'm originally from a small town in Texas called Kerrville. I grew up in the Texas band system and was really fortunate to receive a super high quality education, and also was inspired by my educators to be a good teacher. Then I went to college and majored in trumpet, and I worked a little bit of administrative jobs here and there, stage managing, what have you. Basically, all of the work study jobs you can think of. And then after that, I continued my education at Yale School of Music for my master's. And this is kind of where I started getting a little bit more into the ecosystem of music education, particularly for underrepresented students. Because while I was there, I worked in the Music in Schools program through the Yale School of Music, which basically provides free lessons and mentorship for students in the public school system there. They would otherwise not get it because it's many of the students in New Haven live in poverty. So then after that, the pandemic hits, and I'm still in New Haven, not really doing a whole lot. Then I moved to California and stay with my mom for a couple of months, and Kate and I met during right before the pandemic, actually, at a Rodney Philadelphia big brass band show. She was playing and I was watching, and we hit it off. And then during the summer, she and I created this group called Female Trans Non Binary Brass Players, and this is sort of how we all came together, and it's a beautiful community. And so, ever since then, a whole lot has happened. I moved to New York. I work here at the Kaufman Music Center, and I play a lot with Kate and do a whole bunch of different things. And I'm really happy. And I never would have happened. Dan and I, we never would have met if none of these series of events took place.
It's true. That's true. You say like you've only been living in the city for a few months, and you let's put it this way. You seem like you haven't been living here that long because everything is so exciting, which is very refreshing and nice. All the stuff that like doesn't mean anything anymore to me. I'm just like, oh, people still give a shit. Oh, that's so nice. But anyway, sorry.
Well,
Rebecca.
I'm
Oh,
very.
sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say I'm very lucky to be surrounded by really good people.
Well, that's
Well, hello, Dan. It's nice to meet you via the internet. And again, like Melissa said, thanks for having us.
it's my pleasure.
So, currently, I am a French horn player and freelancer in the New Jersey and New York areas. Born and raised in Toms River, New Jersey. Unlike Melissa, I wouldn't say that I had the most fortunate band programs growing up. Many difficult stories.
Hold on. Tom's River is the home of the Garden State Philharmonic, so you can't say you don't have music.
Oh, I'm not saying that we don't have music. I think that that's a great program, but I'm saying that the educational system could do a lot better.
Sure.
But anyway, so born and raised Toms River, grew up playing piano and flute. Went to high school. They said, we have too many flute players. You want to play French horn? And I said, sure, I don't know what that is, but why not? They handed me a French horn and said, find a private teacher, which is what I did. And that's how I became a French horn player, which is the short synopsis of the story. I later went to Montclair State University and pursued my degree in music performance and French horn, where I studied with Jeff Scott. After a nice 3.5, 4 years there, I later moved to New York City and I went to Manus myself for my master's. Amidst the whole pandemic, I lived there for probably 7 months, got kicked out, COVID happened, and moved back home to New Jersey, unfortunately. I was loving my time in the city and all of my colleagues and the environment there, but made the most out of what we could have during the pandemic, which consisted of me starting a blog called Mind Over Practice, basically about health and performance and how to utilize both your body and your mind in the best way to become successful in whatever aspect of music that you would like to be. And then later, Melissa had given a brief synopsis about kind of how we met. We met via the Female Trans Non-Binary Facebook group page, and we'll get into that story, I guess, in a little bit. But since graduating at Manus earlier this year, I have since started my doctorate at Rutgers University in New Jersey. So I will soon to be Dr. Crew in a couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
And
man.
you're a
Yeah.
professor, Rebecca.
Oh, that's right. Kate reminded me. I'm technically
Yes,
a
you are.
I'm an adjunct professor at Ocean County College in Toms River as well.
Very nice. Very nice. Hey, I've played there. That's nice. All right. Kate, how about you?
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Amrine. I am also a trumpet player based in New York City, trumpet player and educator. Hopefully you can still hear me. I was having some crazy mic things. I had a similar experience to Melissa in the sense that I had a really great band education growing up, and I was really lucky that I was playing classical music and jazz starting in elementary school, and then just kept signing myself up for every performing opportunity possible. And then by the time I got to high school, I was in some university jazz bands outside of high school, which I actually only just remembered today when I was talking to someone about it. But then similar to, probably many other young brass players who happened to be women, I had a lot of sexist experiences when I was younger, and I was like, wait a second, like this is a thing, the fact that I'm a woman and a brass player. And I was like realizing that people would sometimes treat me differently for certain things, and I'm like, this isn't great. And so obviously as I got older, I am always developing better ways to handle that, and of course it doesn't happen as much as maybe I noticed it did when I was younger. But that's something that I always think about when I'm teaching, is like, how can I make the best environment and create this supportive community for all of my students, regardless of gender or race. And obviously, I think that's something that we all should do and hopefully are doing as teachers because it's our responsibility and it's really exciting to be able to do that. And so, one of the things that I like doing, sort of along those lines, is commissioning new music. And so, I do a lot of solo work as a performer in addition to freelancing. And so, commissioning diverse composers is another way that I sort of try and, open these doors to all different people and to open our audience's ears to all different people. Um, and then I guess one other thing that I'll mention, just because it kind of came up before Brass Out Loud ever began, was when I was younger, I started a blog with a friend, also named Rebecca, actually, called Brass Chicks. And we interviewed a lot of really great women brass players across the world and had a little blog series going on. And it was sort of the first thing that I did in this direction of realizing that we can create this community online of people supporting each other. And I'm even more excited that Brass Out Loud exists today because I really believe that we're doing super awesome work, and our upcoming workshop is going to be sweet, and we will tell you all about it. And I'm just so excited.
Yeah, I remember when you were doing the Brass Chicks thing. I was like, oh yeah, that was recent, and it was like not as recent as I thought.
Yeah, it was many years ago. It's crazy. We're all grown up now.
Yeah, I don't like thinking about it. The existential dread is too strong. Um, all right, so the three of you have fairly disparate, coming from very different backgrounds. I mean, um, Texas, Jersey, and what? Katie, I don't think you're
Oh, I didn't
from
mention it. Yeah, I'm from Maryland,
Maryland, right? Yeah,
right outside DC.
great. Yeah, and um, I remember talking. Well, you guys all know Jen Wharton. Talking to her about like the lack of women brass players in particular, well, particularly in Broadway pits, in a lot of ways. But the three of you coming together and trying to forge a new paths for yourselves and for everyone else as well. It's really exciting. So the three of you, how did you kind of discover your similar interests? You've mentioned this group for female non-binary and trans women, or I may have stepped on myself there.
Brass players.
Brass players. There we go. Uh, anyway, I apologize for that. And so, how did you come together with this to form this singular mission for Brass Out Loud?
So we met through the Facebook page. I believe Kate and Melissa were the founders of the Facebook page, if you can remind me correctly. Yes, they were. I kind of just joined the page and I saw the chatter that everybody was, talking about. And there are many different topics about everything that get addressed in that group. But because a lot of the programs were shifted from in-person to online, social media, I feel like, became like a very strong way to connect during the pandemic, whether it was Zoom or Facebook Live or Instagram Live or whatever. We started using social media as this huge platform. And when all these in-person sort of seminars and workshops got moved online, there was a lot of press, so to say. There was a lot of content coming out that people were very unhappy about. And basically, by unhappy and content, I mean that when we started to look and analyze flyer to flyer, program to program, all we saw were pretty much the same cis white males giving the same speeches at different workshops and seminars. And it just became like a big red flag in a sort of way to say, okay, where's the representation in this? There's no women being acknowledged. There's no people of color. There's no people from the LGBTQ plus community that we know of. And it was just kind of disappointing to not see people of your own represented and highlighted in that kind of sort of way. So after multiple people had begun posting and saying, hey, like, this isn't right, just here's another flyer of another thing, I kind of had made the bold post of, well, if we're so upset about this, like we have to be the change that we want to see in the world. So if we're that upset, rather than continuing to post this in this group and saying, man, we're upset about it. Why don't we do something about it? So basically, this idea of Brass Out Loud was kind of configured from just people being upset by what they were seeing. So put a Facebook post up and I said, let's acknowledge this and let's try to do something about it. And the only way to do something about it is to show and represent what we want to see. So put a Facebook post up, a bunch of people commented saying, I want to help, like, let me know. Like, so I reached out to maybe 6 people or so, 6, 7 people. And I said, hey, saw you're interested. What do you think? Would you want to be on board in starting something like this? I have no ideas. I don't know what I'm doing. I have no background in business. I have no background in nonprofit work. I don't know anything. But would you be willing to take the dive into the deep end and pull this off? So throughout the summer, we had a bunch of people. And fortunately, Kate and Melissa both stuck around with me to see this through. And, we created something that we really felt was what the world needed, especially during last summer and the times that we were going through in all aspects, COVID, and everything else that we were seeing on the television, from the elections to the whole George Floyd situation, all the other unfortunate news and events that we had been seeing about police brutality. So we wanted to kind of address this in the best way that we could as possible, for the community that we see and we hold close to our hearts. So that's kind of how we came together and formed Brass Out Loud, by putting our noggins together and making it work with the little information and knowledge of business and stuff that we had.
Yeah, it's particularly last year. There's a Twitter and social media is a very important tool for organizing and getting stuff together, but there's also a lot of fake organizing where it's like you'll see there's like certain formats of tweets that I stopped using Twitter because it was just so frustrating. Just be like, well, it's important that da 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 da. It's like, okay, now what am I supposed to do with that? Or this and that and the other thing. It's like, I guess that's good that I have this information, but I mean, what are we doing with that? Doing about that? I mean, raising awareness is one thing, but like just trying to make people angry is a whole other thing, I guess. I don't know. I'm not an expert in those realms, which is why I talk to people who know more stuff than me. So um when you were, obviously COVID caused a lot of problems for lots of people trying to go to school or do literally anything. But on the other hand, it also provided, because people had time to do stuff, it might have been harder to put stuff together, but you had the time to at least experiment and try and figure stuff out. So maybe you guys, started in the summer of 2020. Um, so what were some of those early, like the early groundwork for what has now developed into this nonprofit? What were some of the things, maybe not even things that like have necessarily flowered quite yet, perhaps, but like just the things that kind of had, hey, we want to do this, we want to do this. Some things that you have already done and some things that you might still want to do.
Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said that we had time to experiment and to learn all of the ins and outs. And that was the biggest thing, was time. Like, how are we going to do this thing, and how are we going to get people to want to come, to get people to care, like you said, to get people angry. And at times I feel like people are no longer angry. It's like, how do you keep people to care about these sorts of things? It's like sometimes it's a fad, and then it like goes away. But luckily, we do have a lot of supporters and people on our side. We started just trying to do the online workshop, of course, and then as a result of that came Bold Chats. And Bold Chats are sort of like our podcast series, similar to yours, except for that they're streamed on Facebook Live. And what it started just putting our faculty on display. It's like, these are the people we hire. They're really awesome, and they're not all white cis males, and that's okay. And then after that, in the off season, we continued to have these chats, bringing on people from all kinds of different backgrounds, not all orchestral players, people who do jazz, people who are master educators, and that has really been I think, an essential part of our organization. And similarly to that, we started a resource sheet that Kate put together after the workshop. And just keep rolling. Everything just led to another thing. Came the panel discussions. Rebecca, do you want to speak a little bit about the panel discussions?
Yeah, so with our panel discussions, we actually had two during our workshop last year. And basically, it was a way for not only the panelists to connect with each other and share their stories, but it was also a place for a lot of our participants to be able to participate actively in the discussions that we were having. So one of the panel discussions that we had last year was about combating racism in the music industry, or even more specifically, the brass community. And we talked about a lot of things there. And like Melissa said, getting people to kind of stay interested and stay not necessarily angry, but stay engaged with what we were doing. I feel like panel discussions, as we even continued them throughout the year, doing our Future Change Makers panel discussion that we held in this past October. And I forget what the other one was called. Remind me. The
like young visionaries or something.
The other one.
So one of them was Future Change Makers, and the other ones were legendary people who paved the way.
Yes. So we did our legendaries earlier in the year, I believe in either February or March. But these discussions were a way for people, either young people or people who don't get to connect due to either distance or just resources that they have available. It's a way for us to get the community heavily involved in not only our mission, but what other people have to say and other people's experiences, exposing people to other things that they might not know or understand. And I think that that's one of the biggest things, is that sometimes we think that we know things, and then we hear some sorts of people speak and we're like, I had no idea. And now I'm more aware of things that are going on that I might not necessarily experience as, a white woman. And that's my own ignorance, but that's also me willing to absorb the information that comes towards me and want to be a better ally in this community. So our panel discussions, I feel, are a really great asset to what makes Brass Out Loud. And, we're excited for our upcoming panel discussions that will be featuring in our January workshop. One is going to be all about musicians' health, which I'm very interested in. I myself am a person who has a chronic illness, and I've been very candid about that, about dealing with that in the ways that I need to, and being a performer who, is prone to fainting and having to adapt my situation to learning how to perform again. So that's kind of like my area that I kind of help contribute, is people with disabilities, chronic illnesses, and such like that. And then we have another panel discussion, which is going to be about pretty much different career paths. We're going to have a bunch of people, which we'll mention later, I'm sure, during the workshop discussion, who are going to come in and talk about the different career paths they took in music that aren't necessarily just orchestral or the soloists that we see, which I think is going to be really awesome. So it's just a way for, the community to connect with each other and keep the conversation going.
It's interesting. One of the panelists that you've had and have had, and I believe is on the workshop this year, is Richard White. who I remember talking with Melissa about it, when we first met, but I had, worked with him at a festival for a few summers, for a few weeks here and there, and I loved the guy, right? Loved him. We had a great time. We'd go, like, he would take us to the movies, we'd hang out, like, he's a great dude, right? But as the summer, he releases this book. He goes on, the Daily Show, the whole thing. I felt like I knew the guy pretty well, like as far as like a teacher student. Didn't know anything about him, and it changes, like, completely changes like when you know someone's story, like it changes what you want to know about them, and like I don't know, like it's everyone has these things where it's just like these people have all so much wisdom to offer, and half the time, well, I mean, I was a dumb 16-year-old, what do I know, but at the time, but like, they have you sometimes you just have to ask, right? Because and there's so many musicians have struggled through so many things, and if you're struggling with something, it helps to know that someone else has done the same thing, you know what I mean? um so before we get into, some more recent stuff, the first workshop, your first last January. Um, and kind of going into this year's as well, what were some things that you tried that maybe didn't work, or maybe some things that you learned from that first one that you're implementing? I'm not trying to be like, hey, tell me you're just, drop the dirt. No, I just mean, like, what were some of the things that you may have learned in those early, that some of the things you tried that have really affected how you've gone forward over the next following 12 months?
For sure. Well, one thing that I was super passionate about was making this workshop and every workshop that we do different than every other brass workshop out there. And we're doing that through these panel discussions and through other master classes like yoga and mental health and mindfulness and career coaching. And so having these kind of extra musical events that keep people, well rounded as whole musicians or whole people is something that I was always really hoping that we would continue, and that I know we are going to continue, because it's not really something that you see, but it's something that's super super necessary. And if we think back to when we were 16, I just like can't even imagine if I had someone tell me like, hey, your mental health's important as a musician. Like that would have changed so much. Like I think it probably would be true for everyone. Or like even just like learning how to manage your time and like realizing what kinds of careers as a brass player there are and what you can actually do when you graduate. um, so having these different kinds of events is something they're always going to be a part of the workshop and always going to be a part of our work as Brass Out Loud. Um, in terms of things that we learned, well, because I don't know if we mentioned this, but the workshop that we held last year was here on Zoom and was virtual. And in some ways, it was really, really great because we could just send people into breakout rooms and have the tuba class over there and the trombone class over there. And I was the sender. So that was a big learning experience real quick, when I made a mistake and everyone came back into the room and then I had to send them out again. So we mastered that part for sure. Um, but eventually, we want to get offline, as I'm sure so many other people do. And we really are excited to hopefully at one point, and hopefully the near future, have an in person workshop. One of the nice things about Zoom, though, was the chat. And we had so many people talking the entire time, going through every masterclass, remarking on what was happening, what was being discussed, people sharing resources. That was actually how a resource sheet came about, was because people are like, oh, hey, wait, there's this really great book that's similar to what this person's talking about. And then I just started compiling the list and I was like, oh, we need to put this out there. This is what people actually need and what's actually going to help people. Um, so finding a way to keep that conversation going, even if we're in person, and keep that connection amongst participants and the faculty is something that I am excited for us to keep doing as well.
I remember back out the Kennesaw State outside of Atlanta held a couple of these national brass symposiums back in 2010, 2011. Only did it 2 years. But it's the same, it's that kind of thing where you go to, there's all these events, but you sit in essentially a concert hall and watch something happen. You're just there observing, and maybe some of the select few will get on stage to play with Michael Mulcahy, or or whatever, you know, Chris Martin or Colin Williams or whoever it was, whoever it is, the select few, and then that's it. You essentially spend all this money to go watch some people, and there's nothing wrong with that per se, but at a certain point they do start to blend together. I don't think any that's not, something, that's not something that's particularly weird to say. A lot of so doing something different, and the interaction is so vital, to trying to learn from people learning from each other. um so on a more personal, like on a more like personal musician level, like running a non what the life of a nonprofit is always, it's just like you just never stop asking for money. Like that's the thing. It's just like it never ends. You can never take a break because you just have to keep asking for money, which is that's just how it works. How do you guys how do you guys, kind of split that up and, maintain your focus on what is a very important part of, of your careers at this point, while also keep, continuing to perform in the city? I mean, but like, you all are so busy, all the time. I like trying to get you. I was surprised we were able to do this in December, just because it's December and everyone's a brass player. You know what I mean? So, how does that balance look? What does that balance look like for you all?
I think I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I'll speak for myself. But I'm sure that the feeling is probably mutual in a way. Um, it's hard, to be honest. Like if we're going to be like blunt about the entire thing and really candid, I mean, running a nonprofit with just the three of us and us being, I'm more spatially distanced than Melissa and Kate, who get to see each other more often than I ever see them. I think I only met them once in person, which is, kind of funny to think about too. But in
Wait,
this,
still
yeah,
that's
I've
amazing.
only they've met a bunch of times in person. I've only met them once in person, which is just funny to think about because we've been doing this for a year, a year and a
Yeah, I
half.
can't
Almost,
believe
yeah.
it's almost 2 years. It's crazy.
But in the sense of, for us, it took a lot of time, patience, even lack thereof, um, on behalf of everybody, to really just to get to where we are. We had to be patient with the nonprofit process, which, takes a little bit and requires you to just kind of sit on your hands for a little bit and wait. But in the meantime, even throughout the course of the year and throughout the course of months, we have multiple meetings with each other, and we sometimes the meetings will be short if one of us has to go, and sometimes the meetings will be, you know 2 hours or more long, just because we got information, we got to get it to each other, and we got to figure out what our next steps are. So in terms of being busy and splitting things up, there's a lot of times where someone, if we're talking about like social media posting, if someone can't get to it, we say, hey, can somebody else, do it today? And it's like someone will chime in and be like, yeah, sure, I got it. And it's nice to have that kind of support and backup. And it's nice that there's three of us rather than even just one or two, to kind of, have that teamwork effect and have that support moving forward, because there's parts of this that are extremely frustrating, and there's a parts of this that are extremely hard, especially, as you mentioned, Dan, like in terms of fundraising and asking people for money. We, when we started this during COVID, one of our fears was, it's a hard time for everybody. A lot of people are out of work. We almost feel bad for asking people for money. But also, there were a lot of people who came forward and said, your mission is, something special and we want to support you. And even if that's $5 out of my pocket today, that's $5 towards a mission that I really believe in. So in terms of fundraising and stuff like that, I mean, the way I like to look at it is the worst people can say is no. And that's something that sometimes you gotta, eat or chew on or whatever. And it is what it is. But if you don't ask, you'll never know. And the worst answer you're gonna get is, hey, not this year. Hey, can't, no thanks, whatever. And you move on. And we have a lot of great resources, and we've compiled a lot of lists to get our missions out there. And, we work together, I think, in a really special way to get things done. And we each have our things that we take care of. For the workshop specifically, I handle a lot of like budget stuff and, facilitating information to faculty. And we each have our hands in different pots and we take care of different things. And, I'm sure Kate and Melissa have probably a little bit of a different perspective on how we split things up. So I don't know if Melissa, you want to chime in a little, a little.
Yeah, I mean, just like any nonprofit, everybody's doing a lot and like a high concentration of things at once. So we are very fortunate now that we are a 501c3 to have a board, and our board is really phenomenal. And they're not all brass players, of course. They come from different backgrounds. So we have
That's
some
good.
people yeah, exactly. And we have some people who specialize in this kind of thing, like fundraising, and community engagement and things like that. So it's really helpful to have people backing us and giving us ideas, because we are humans and we don't know everything and we do mess up, and sometimes things don't go well and sometimes we don't raise the money that we need to raise. But like Rebecca said, in the end, there are people who are willing to give us a hand. Luckily, now that we're 501c3, it kind of opens the doors to a lot of different grants and support that we can receive. This past year, we were lucky to get a grant from the Colburn School, and that's funding a lot of this year's workshop, as well as sponsorships from a few different organizations, and I'll just tell you them now. Shires, Eastman, Monster Oil, Green Hoe Trombones, yeah, and they're really phenomenal, and not didn't think twice, to offer their support. And of course, I had to get over asking people for things, because I think that I just had too much pride. I was like, oh, like I can't ask my friend who is just also graduated with a music degree in the middle of a pandemic. Like, it doesn't feel great. But yeah, every little bit has contributed to the whole, and I think we're just really fortunate for that.
Well, it's hard enough to get people to just click on things even if there's not money involved. You know what I mean? So it's tough and a real testament to what you guys have built.
I can just add one more thing. All of these difficult moments aside, we did have a really awesome Kickstarter campaign last year, and we raised a couple $1,000s, which was great. And we've raised a little bit more this year for this upcoming workshop, and we are obviously always soliciting donations. And if you are out there wondering what exactly this money goes to, I can tell you that right now. Obviously, it goes to any things that we have administrative wise, like funding our website and hosting and things like that. Eventually, any way to make things happen in person will be really, really great to have support on. And then paying our faculty, because we really don't want to be forcing people to do this for a fee that they don't deserve, especially if we're getting these amazing new voices to be on the forefront of, what awesome excellence in the brass world, performing and teaching wise, is. Everyone needs to be compensated fairly. So this is something that we really, really want to always continue to do, and are especially trying to do now. So
Well, that is a good. I mean, let's just go ahead and segue into this year's workshop. I mean, that's kind of the whole point, right? Of us hanging out here tonight. What I mean, we've been kind of obliquely touching on some of the different panels, some of the da 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 da. But what I mean, let's just I mean, go. Let's go. Let's just promote it. I mean, we've got you have incredible faculty, and a lot of exciting stuff.
Yeah, so we're very excited to be back with year 2 of Brass Out Loud's workshop, online via Zoom. So you can do this from anywhere, your apartment, your school, on the road, not while you're driving, of course. And we're also really excited to announce that our fee has not gone up at all, even though inflation is out the roof. So for 3 days of packed music education, you only pay $120, and you're getting a really killer faculty. If you take a look at our website, we have another collage of the people that we hired this year, and it is just as beautiful of a group of people as it was last year. I remember, and this is on our website too, we asked Rodney Marsalis about what his ideal brass community looks like, and he said that it's whenever you walk out into the street of New York City and you see people from all over the world and you hear different languages, and you just see a really wide variety. And I think that that is also representative of our faculty this year. So on day one, I'm going to go through one day. Maybe we can each take a day. On day one, we have a 10 a.m. warm-up class. And just FYI, this is all in Eastern time. So you Pacific Coast folks, if it's a little early, fear not, because we will be archiving these videos, and you can always come back to them and watch them up to a month after. So at 10 a.m., the trumpet warm-up clinician is Wayne Dumaine. Our horn clinician is Denise Tryon. Trombone is Haley Brunell, and tuba youth is Chanel Krishlow, who was also on our faculty last year and is just like the most fabulous, amazing person. And then at 11 a.m., we have a master class called Creating a Great Brass Community with Red, who is a professor at Baylor University, and their studio is notorious for having a lot, like bonding all the time and killing it at competitions because they have that vibe amongst their studio. He's also the author of a couple of books that promote this, so I imagine that he'll be pulling from those. From 1 to 3 p.m. after a nice hour-long lunch break, where you can either hang out with us on the Zoom call or go do whatever it is you need to do, we have trumpet performance master classes. Sorry, we have all instrument performance master classes.
Look, just because you're a trumpet player, the rest of us want some love too.
That's right. And, we heard you, and we have a euphonium masterclass this year, too. Last year they were combined, so this is one of our major points this year was to make sure that we have euphonium representation. Another thing is these masterclasses are now 2 hours. Last year was an hour and a half, so people who want to play, which is pretty much everybody who wants to play, they can sign up and get some really great one-on-one time with these clinicians. So for our trumpet masterclass, we have Chris Martin. For horn, Lynette Lopez-Compton. Trombone, Megubi Kanda. Euphonium, Adam Frey. And tuba, Velvet Brown. And then finally, we wrap up day one with an hour and a half panel discussion titled Career Diversity in the Brass World. And it's exactly the type of people you would think. It's not your typical, I play in the back of an orchestra. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, some of our faculty does do that, and it's an amazing thing, and it's something that I really appreciate. But yeah, we have Amelia Rosenberger, Rusty Holmes, Riley Mulherker, and Jamie Dauber. So a really fabulous group of people.
I can talk about day two just a little bit. We're pretty much dubbing it day two as our Musicians Health Day, which is really cool and really inspiring because, as Kate said a little bit earlier, if somebody had told all of us that taking care of your mental health was important many, many years ago, maybe we would all not be as crazy as we are. But anyway, so to kick off an early morning, we're going to also be starting at 10 a.m. Eastern time, and we are happy to have Dr. Brianne Borden back with us from Yoga for All Musicians. So she's going to take us through some basic yoga moves that can help with our breathing and just to get in touch with our bodies a little bit more. At 11 a.m., we have a masterclass with Ashley Hall, which is entitled Rediscovering Our Expansive Creative Life. Ashley Hall is kind of like a life coach, and she does a lot of stuff at the Longy School of Music in terms of kind of pretty much figuring out what you want to do with your career and which direction you want to go. So she's going to talk to us about all sorts of stuff like that. 12 p.m., we're going to have our lunch break, which again, as Melissa mentioned, you can hang out with us, you can take a break, take a nap, whatever you'd like to do. But at 1 p.m., we're going to be back with Daniel Petro, who actually was in touch with Melissa. He's actually, I believe, a Brooklyn-based actor and director. And he is going to give us a presentation entitled Presence and the Performer. So it's pretty much about getting in touch and getting in touch with yourself and performing to the best of your abilities. And then at 2 p.m., we are going to wrap with another panel discussion titled Musicians' Health. And that is going to include myself from the many different perspectives that I have on mental health, physical health, chronic illnesses, and stuff like that. We're also going to welcome Katie Bergloff, who has dealt with focal dystonia, and she's written a book. She has her own type of blog and journal where you can follow pretty much her life experience with focal dystonia. We're also happy to have Stephanie Smith, who has written 2 volumes on the Valsalva maneuver and how to beat that. It's called Beat VM. And then we also have Jasmine Piggott. She's currently a doctoral student at Peabody, tuba player, and she has a great background, especially with physical health and mental health and even racial and social injustice. So it's going to be a really awesome panel discussion with all 4 of us.
Yes, I'm so excited for that. Can you hear me okay? Okay, beautiful. So I'm going to talk about day 3. And I always feel a little sad when we get to the last day because you're like, oh my God, it's almost over. But this day is filled with awesome stuff. So starting at 10 a.m., we're going to have melody and improvisational language with Tony Glausey. And if you do not know who he is, you definitely need to check him out because he is an awesome jazz trumpet player, jazz and beyond. It's always amazing to me that he has 10 albums to his name as a soloist and a lot of wisdom there to share. And so when I say that that's a masterclass, people can play for him, people can play with him on Zoom, interacting live. You can ask questions about jazz in general. It's really, really open. And we wanted it to be that way just so that everyone, regardless of experience, can get something out of it. Because we had a lot of people last year who were like, oh, I'm not sure if this is right for me, and should I still come? And it's like, oh my gosh, yes, please, please come. It's going to be great. You're going to learn stuff. And you can always ask as many questions as you want. So then at 11 a.m., we're going to have our masterclass with the 3 of us, and this is titled Entrepreneurship, Diversity, and More. And each of us, of course, we have our own experiences and so many things that we do in our own careers outside of Brass Out Loud, and so this is our time to share that with everyone. A little bit of how the organization got started, what things that are important to us, things that we think everyone else should be doing to create a inspiring brass community, and more. And then our lunchtime, and it's the last lunch, so we know it'll be a good hang. And then from 1 to 3, we're having the last day of the performance master classes. So on trumpet, we have Susan Ryder. On horn, we have Richard Dean. Trombone is Jeremy Wilson. Euphonium is Bente Illevold. And tuba, Richard White. And then our very last event of the whole workshop at 3 is the Zoom hang with everyone. And so we invite all the participants, obviously, but also all of the faculty. And last year we had a lot of people chiming in, and it was really fun to see which faculty members would show up. And, you know, participants can ask those specific faculty members questions about their masterclass earlier in, you know, the previous couple days and all sorts of things. It's a really fun chance for people to reflect on their favorite experiences and what they're going to be taking from the workshop into their own careers or, you know, just teaching experiences in general. So it's a pretty packed schedule, but it's very diverse, not only with the participants and faculty, but in terms of the actual events. And we are so excited.
With it's fine with something you mentioned earlier, just briefly. It's like the idea that like, oh, I don't know if this is for me. Should I go? And it's just like, look, you already paid the money. You should just do it. You know, as on a musician level, like so often you learn so much. You can sometimes learn more from someone who does something completely opposite of what you do than maybe a 15,000th trombone masterclass. In my case, that does not, you know, of course, every musician is different, but that's something I've always found enjoyable. But yeah, and if you're watching, you can see the link on the screen. It's brassoutloud.com/workshop registration. You can register. You can look at all of the people that they've been talking about, in a breakdown of the days, and you can check that out.
Can I just say a really quick thing about who the workshop is for, since we're just
Yes.
sort of circling around this topic? We had some people last year who would message us, some of whom are our close friends, and would say the same question, and like, "Oh, is this workshop for me? Like, I'm a cis white man. Can I come?" And it's like, "No, yes, please, please come. We want you. We need obviously as many people registered as possible, but everyone is responsible for making this a better, inspiring brass community in everything that we're doing, whether you're teaching private lessons or performing on Broadway or gigging in some random small town. So this is something that we all want to be taking to our own students and performing opportunities. And, you know, all of these important aspects that you learn at the workshop are applicable to all of all ages as well. We had a 13-year-old, I believe, and then we had people who are over 60. So it can really hit everyone at different times in their life, which is really great.
Yeah, that's actually, I was thinking about that kind of at the beginning a little bit was there's I remember when in 2017, I guess it was, when kind of this whole Me Too movement was kind of really taking hold, and you know, Harvey Weinstein was on trial and all this stuff, right? I remember talking to specific musicians. Of course, I'm not going to say who they were, but like being like, oh well, you know, now, yeah, people that I would never do, you know, people I know very well who wouldn't be like, you know, who wouldn't do anything weird, but it was just like, oh, but does that mean that there's no more space for me as a white man? And it's like one of those things where you're like, there's always going to be space. There's been space for literally the entirety of human history for you, but I think there can be fear, um basically being like, oh well, are you pushing us out, or you want your own little club? And sometimes it's like, yeah, best guess what? People can have their own little clubs too. You don't have to be a part of everything. But I think, it's more about, and please, like, jump in and correct me, but like it's not so much about replacing anyone. It's more about like, hey, you guys have taken up all this space at the to the detriment of everyone else. You know, maybe stop doing that. And sometimes I think that that's just it's a fundamental misunderstanding of these kind of things that are for like you know promoting diversity. Of course, like I said, sometimes it is like, hey, sit this one out though.
And also, one quick thought. Sorry, Melissa. Diversity isn't also just hiring people of color. A lot of the workshops that we were talking about last year that we were seeing, people were hiring, the same white female trombone player as like, look at this diverse person. And it's like,
Mm.
if we're seeing these same faces at every opportunity, someone who doesn't look like that person, who maybe doesn't even like that person, is going to be like, oh, so this is the person who's supposed to represent me. Like, what about someone else? And so that's another important thing. Diverse voices and perspectives is a really big one.
Yeah, exactly. And to just kind of piggyback off of what Kate said, it goes back to the saying, you can't be what you can't see. So, a very personal anecdote, me growing up as a Mexican trumpet player, I never saw another female Mexican trumpet player just totally crushing it. And now, luckily, because Instagram is like a big part of my life, I know a few, and it's really wonderful. But I imagine that they also felt the exact same thing growing up, and that's why there are so few of us. And going back to your point of adding on to the education that people already receive, I feel very fortunate that in the past 2 years, even though it was a pandemic, my scope of what being a musician, like what the possibilities of being a musician has widened so much, because I was studying to become an orchestral trumpet player, and I literally got driven to resent it and was like, okay, that's it, I'm over it. And then now getting to meet all of these wonderful, diverse people who come from all kinds of different places has just really brought the love back. And it's actually really beautiful. But I think this is what a lot of people in our workshop experienced last year, too. Is like, okay, we have this void in a lot of different regards, and Brass Out Loud fills that void for a lot of people.
Yeah, I've same kind of thing living on Instagram. It's so easy to I was talking to someone about this earlier last week or so. It's just like growing up as a brass player and being like, you know, when it comes to diversity in careers, basically being like, it's orchestral life or nothing, and then being able to realize that, oh, you can do literally anything. I mean, it might be a struggle to get paid for it, but you can literally do anything you want, you want to make you want to be a member of 14 female-led brass bands in Brooklyn? Go ahead, you can do that. Um,
You definitely can do that.
yeah. Um, so as you go through the workshop, which again I guess I should mention, I don't think we've mentioned when that is. It's the first week of January, correct?
Yep,
I didn't pull up the dates. It's silly me. That feels stupid.
it's going to be January 7th through the 9th. So it's a Friday through a Sunday. Pretty much every day is going to be from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern. And I just wanted to throw in here really quick. Melissa mentioned that it is $120 for the entire weekend. If you're like, oh, I can't go the entire weekend, I can only go Sunday, you can get a ticket for just one day for $50 if you're interested.
And if you're in a studio, we have a studio discount. If 4 of your studio folks want to register, there will be a discount for you. So we already have a couple schools taking advantage of that already. So we might have to battle it out and see which school is going to win with the most registration.
It's not a
So-
competition, guys.
Never, of course not. But I will say trumpets are winning registration numbers right now. So if you play French horn, trombone, euphonium, or tuba, we want you especially to register. And trumpets too.
Oh God. I mean, you
Looking
never
at you, Dan.
can never take the trumpet player. Right. Yeah, you're right. Can never take the trumpet player out of the person, Um, teasing, of course. Um, so as we head into 2022, we're heading towards like wrapping up in just, in a little bit, but in addition to as we go towards the workshop 2022 workshop, maybe like we can talk about like maybe what your guys' thoughts are for the future of Brass Out Loud. More, maybe some in the short term, over the next year or two, but as you visualize the long term as well, because it's as well, I'd say as things open back up, but who knows if that's actually going to happen for real. But um, as you guys look towards the future of this organization, what are kind of some of the things you envision, both in the short term and further down the road?
As I believe Kate, it might have been Melissa, mentioned before, one of you two. In the future, we would like to obviously hold this in person due to just, the uncertainty of the very near future. We're not going to put anybody at risk right now, and we're going to hold it on Zoom as we did last year. And, anybody who is anybody is welcome to come. You don't have to just be from the US. We had people from Canada and Costa Rica and the UK last year, which is also super awesome. So things like that, especially kind of like the online platform, give us an opportunity to connect people from around the world, which is super cool. So we would like to keep the online version in some sort of fashion, to be determined how. But I know that we would like to continue to do the workshops in person, and we might even like to start doing maybe multiple workshops a year. It's just a thought that we have right now. There's nothing set in stone. But as for some of our nearer things that we're looking for, Kate and Melissa, do you want to talk maybe about like the panel discussions and bold chats that we're thinking of?
Totally. I'll just say a quick thing. So with the panel discussions, I feel like we could honestly have a combating racism in the music world discussion every year. And this is something that everyone should always be thinking about, is always doing and striving for. And it's hard for us to not want to do these things over and over again because there's always different voices that we could do. So we are alternating every year which kinds of panel discussions we have. So this year we had a lot of themed ones. And so next year are going to be instrument specific. We know that if you get 4 trumpet players in a room, the conversation is totally going to go to things like mouthpieces and horn instrument brands and all of that good stuff that we love geeking out about. and high notes and all of that. And we want to be able to create a space for people to do that. And so we're going to have instrument specific panels. And it's also a really great way of aligning people from different parts of the world that might not have gotten the pleasure to encounter themselves otherwise. So we love sort of making those new connections in a way.
Yeah, and on top of that, the Brass Out Loud staff, in the past year, we put on Zoom seminars at a few different universities, which is kind of what prompted us to put one on this year at the workshop. And our hope is to continue these conversations at universities across the United States, and hopefully in person here in New York, because that is where we are registered as a 501c3 nonprofit, which means that your donation is tax deductible.
And honestly, like, people should just come to New York. It's better here than it is everywhere else. What are you gonna do? Um,
I was
I'm,
just on tour recently and I can agree.
And I can agree because I'm from Texas.
God. Great. Well, I think, um, I think we can just wrap up with, and we've obviously we've talked about this a lot enough, but maybe each one of you can like say like we obviously we've talked about why what you're what we're doing. Yes, I'm a part of it now. What you're doing is important, but maybe like a little bit of like a personal feeling of why you feel this is so necessary now. Each one of you, as you look at your own careers and like I said, we've touched on it here and there, but I think it would be a good way to kind of wrap things up and put a bow on it. Whoever wants to go first, go. Yeah.
I can go first. I think that Brass Out Loud is honestly really necessary. Something that we like to ask everybody at the end of our bowl chats is, what does your ideal brass community look like? And I like to just leave it with that, because that question is so broad. We don't necessarily mean what kind of people do you want to see. We mean, what do you want to feel? What do you want to get out of a community? And the question can be interpreted in so many different ways. And that's part of what I love about the question that we ask. But for me, I think that it's so necessary because there's so many different types of people in the world. There's the people, race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identities, disabilities, and things like that. And I think it's important to recognize that nobody is better than the person next to them, in a sense. Like, just because I might look a certain way and somebody else might look a certain way and somebody else might look a certain way, we are all still human beings on this earth, all doing the same thing, which is playing music and doing what we love every single day, in and out. And I think it's just important to create a community that we want, our future children and the future generations that come next to be immersed in. We want them to grow up in a society that isn't engulfed in hate and so divided, which is kind of where I still feel like, especially the United States more specifically, lies right now. And I don't think that we want that for the future. So I just kind of want, you see that picture of everybody holding hands and they're all different. That's kind of what I want in terms of the brass community.
I love that. I could add just really quickly that I think it comes down to power a lot, and who has the power and who's taking power away from other people. And so for all of us, we, even if you are, a certain group of some sort, we always have power in some ways, and how we use that power is really important. And that's something that I think attending the workshop and attending the panel discussions and the bold chats will maybe help people reevaluate what that means to them. And so for me, that's something like, okay, so if you're a trumpet professor at a university, who are the guests that you're bringing in? Or what repertoire are you programming for your trumpet ensemble? What repertoire are you suggesting for your students? If you're playing duets and you're trying to get someone to emulate a certain sound, are you immediately going to recommend Phil Smith? Or are you going to also maybe recommend somebody else? like Allison Balsam or literally anybody else. And so these kinds of choices that we can make as people in positions of power, and that even goes to teaching private lessons to someone who's in 5th grade, showing them examples of these are other musicians out there who look like you. This is another band playing the same piece that you're playing, and just using these little moments to inspire people and encourage people so that all people are in this brass community and feel welcomed and don't feel like this isn't a place for them.
It's funny because it's like Melissa said when she was like talking about finding other, Mexican trumpet players. Like, there's no, with Instagram, with whatever, there's not really an excuse anymore. I mean, I don't know that there was excuses before, but like now there really isn't.
But people are just afraid to get uncomfortable. And I think a lot of just because I teach at a college and because I'm technically doing my DMA as well and seeing everything from that perspective, people are afraid to just do things that are unfamiliar and uncomfortable and to take these risks and go out on a limb and say, hey, you should find this other piece by a woman composer, or hey, is there a reason that our university orchestra is not programming music by Black composers at all? These are the kinds of questions that we could be asking and should be asking, and that I think sometimes people are just afraid to ask them.
Sorry, Melissa, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Oh, no, it's okay. I really don't have too much to add. Y'all covered many of the bases, and I definitely agree with both of you. For me, I think that Brass Out Loud is really important. Number one, on a personal level, it's just our little baby, and so it means a lot. But particularly 2 points: spreading awareness and the impact. At the end of last year's workshop, we sent out a survey for feedback, and we got, things that obviously could be better. Euphoniums, having euphonia representation, and then also how it impacted different participants as well. And it was anonymous, and to hear all these kind words and testaments of, oh, I had no idea that there were so many people who thought about these kinds of different issues such as race in a trumpet studio, and hearing these perspectives from Black and brown musicians or female or trans or what have you. It was literally some people's first times, and I think that is what our biggest mission is to, it's not about us, it's about giving people a platform and giving people space to share their stories, to bring awareness that it's out there, and that's why Brass Out Loud is super, super important.
Well, fantastic. I guess we can begin to wind down from there. Just to mention again, it's brassoutloud.com, and then to register for the workshop, brassoutloud.com/workshop registration. Again, was mentioned, Brass Out Loud's a 501c3, so if you go to brassoutloud.com/support, you can make a tax-deductible donation. But we've been talking about the workshop. That is January 7th through the 9th. $125. Studio discounts.
Whoop, $120.
$120.
It's cheaper, just like that.
Use that $5 to buy an overpriced latte. $50 for a single day. That's fantastic. I just have to say thank you guys so much. I'm going to do a little bit of say hey about my podcast, which is Divergent Paths with Dan Dunford. If you can subscribe on Apple, on Stitcher, on Spotify, on Google, and Amazon, all those things. If you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/divergentpathspod, or there's a donate link in the description, the Twitch description. I have fancy stickers now. They're holograms. They're really cool. I like them. And I even have buttons now. It's really cool. So, yeah, that's cool. Anyway, back to the actual important part. Melissa and Rebecca and Kate, thank you so much. And you can follow them as well at their, on Instagram. It's at Brass Out Loud. You can find all three of these fine women on Instagram as well. Yeah, thank you so much. This was really a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having us,
Thank
Dan.
you.